Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Planetarium, the Sky Tonight, which is part of our MOS at Home programming. My name is Janine, my pronouns are she and her, and I'll be your moderator today. That means I'll be reading some of your questions and responses, which you can submit below using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen here in the Zoom meeting. If you'd like to see captions during today's program, you can click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen and select show subtitles. And if you're joining us on Facebook, we're so excited to have you here with us, but unfortunately, I'm unable to see your responses at this time. We're so delighted to have you all here today as our audience. Let's meet our guide who's going to tell us what's up in the sky.
Hello everyone, my name is Katie. My pronouns are she and her, and today I'm going to be your guide as we talk about different objects in the night sky. So I thought this week we could do something a little bit different and have the audience choose what we want to talk about. So we've created a poll, and Janine will bring it up for us in just a moment, but I wanted to describe the different choices, give you a little background. So first of all, we'll be talking about stars and constellations in pretty much all three of the choices. So if you were looking to see some constellations, you'll definitely get that. But the first choice will be moons and planets. So now is a really good time to look for planets in the night sky. And so we can talk about those as well as our moon and the moons of those planets. So that's one choice. Another one is types of stars. So there are lots of different types of stars out there, stars that are really big and small and different colors, some that orbit around each other. So all of the different types of stars that are out there and how they gravitationally interact with each other. So that's going to be another category. And then the last category will be deep sky objects and the Milky Way. So deep sky objects are things like other galaxies, nebulas, star clusters, basically things that aren't just an individual star or a solar system or something like that. So those are the three choices, and Janine, I think we are ready for the poll. So go ahead and choose the one that you'd like to talk about today.
Just waiting to see if a couple more people want to answer. We're really close to almost all of you having voted. If you don't want to vote, that's okay too. I'm just going to see if it kind of steadies out, which it looks like it has. I'll go ahead and end that poll and share results.
All right, looks like we are going to be talking about moons and planets. And don't worry, we're doing more of these virtual programs every week, so we will definitely get to the other two categories at some point. We do them all the time. So that sounds great. So I'm going to share my screen now so we can head into Stellarium. This program is completely free. You can download it from stellarium.org. That URL will be available at the end of the program if you forget between now and then. And it's really awesome. You can look at the sky from anywhere on the Earth. You can even look at the sky from other planets or moons, which is pretty cool. And you can set it to whatever time you'd like. And there's a lot of different features that you can play around with. So if you are interested in downloading it, that would be awesome. There's a lot you can do. So we are currently looking north, but all of the bright objects are actually located more toward the south and the southeastern part of the sky. So we're going to turn around and you'll see three very bright objects in the sky. The brightest one is our moon, and Stellarium does kind of make it look fuzzy, almost like a really big star or planet, but it is the moon, and if we zoom in you'll be able to see it a lot better. You can actually see the phase of the moon. So if you know what phase of the moon this is, go ahead and type it in the chat. If you don't, you can put a question mark. That's totally fine too.
Just waiting to see what people are thinking, what phase it might be in. Oh, Brianna says waxing gibbous.
Yeah, that's correct.
Got a couple others for waxing gibbous, a question mark and a half, which I like.
Yeah, so it's pretty close to a half, just past it. But a waxing gibbous basically means that the side that's facing the Earth is mostly lit up, and it's going to keep getting more lit up until we reach a full moon. So a full moon is like the next official phase. But now I would like you to look at the surface of the moon and make some observations. So tell me what you notice, what sticks out, anything like that. And feel free to put that in the chat as well.
Yeah, I really like looking at the moon through a telescope. And I think my favorite part about it, Katie, is the Terminator.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very scary, but the Terminator is the line here that separates the light from the dark side. So it's kind of like if you had dusk or dawn on the moon.
Yeah. All right. So we've got craters. We see that some parts are dark, big dark areas, a little bit more than half a moon, some more craters.
Yeah, great observation. So there's craters all over the surface of the moon. And part of that, I mean, well, all of that is because it gets hit all the time from various objects in space, like asteroids and meteors and things like that, especially earlier on in the solar system when things were a bit more chaotic. Now, the reason the moon has so many visible craters and the Earth not so much is because things on the surface of the moon don't change very often. So on Earth, we have things like volcanoes and earthquakes. We have an atmosphere and erosion from, you know, rivers and bodies of water and things like that. So the surface of the Earth is changing a lot of the times, but the moon doesn't have any geological processes going on inside of it. So the surface doesn't really change. It doesn't have an atmosphere either. So Earth's atmosphere serves to protect it from a lot of the objects that it encounters in space. So, you know, bits of rock and dust and things like that usually burn up in Earth's atmosphere, whereas the moon doesn't have that. So it's very easy for things to hit its surface. A long time ago in the early solar system, so about 4.5 billion years ago, when the moon formed, it was much different. It was made of molten rock, essentially, and there were a ton of volcanoes. And so the volcanoes, when they erupted, they left behind these like vast areas of basalt. So, and basins that would fill with basalt. So that's why you see all of those dry, darkened areas. Those are areas that have a lot of basalt in the sediment on the moon. So the lighter areas, those are the lunar highlands. Those are elevated, and you can see a lot of the times they are because of old volcanoes, or just areas that don't have as much basalt in them, and it's lighter sediment that kind of floated to the top back when the moon was made mostly of molten rocks. It was lighter stuff that floated to the top, and then the denser material that floated to the bottom to form part of those basins that we can see now that are called lunar maria. All right, awesome observations, everyone. I hope you learned a little bit more about the moon, but now we can move on and talk about some planets. And actually, I'm going to pause first to see if there's any questions about the moon so far, or anything else that's space related.
All right, while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, I'll say the reason I like the Terminator so much is because you can really see those craters pulled out in relief really well. It looks really cool.
Definitely. Let's see
Through a
if we can
telescope.
zoom in and see if there's any.
Okay, here are some questions.
A little
One
bit.
of them is, how many craters are there on the moon?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea. I think probably more than we can count. Even just by looking at it from Earth, you can see that there are so many. So if you were actually on the surface of the moon, there's probably so many that, you know, you can't see from here on Earth because they're just really small, or, you know, the far side of the moon, the side that we can't see from Earth, is also has lots of craters on it. So countless craters.
This one I'm going to say so that you can help people understand a little bit better. The person wants to know, why some of the moon is black and you can't see it. So I think they're talking about the far side of the moon.
Yeah, so the areas of the moon that are darker are just because the sun is not shining on it. So the moon is tidally locked with the Earth, which means that the same side is always facing the Earth, meaning the other side of the moon we can't see ever. But that doesn't mean that it's dark because the other side of the moon still gets the same amount of sunlight as the side that's facing us. It's just that because we can't see that other side of the moon, we don't really notice that it's lit up. So, for example, when we have a new moon, which is the phase of the moon where we can't see it at all, it's because the sun is shining directly on the opposite side of the moon. So, we're not seeing any of the lit up side, it's just only the dark the side that's facing us that's completely dark. And so that's what a new moon phase is. So it's not actually dark on the other side. It still gets the same amount of sunlight. We just don't notice it because we only ever see one side of the moon. So I hope that clears it up a little bit.
Yeah, I like thinking about like when it's light here in Boston, it could be very dark in Australia, and it's the same kind of thing happening on the moon.
Exactly.
I think we can go on to the next adventure.
All right. So, by the way, we're looking in the southern part of the sky, very close to a constellation that's pretty popular. It looks like a teapot. And so, this might help you find some of those objects. They are pretty bright. So, maybe the objects will help you find this constellation. But right next to the moon here and these two planets that'll be more reliable is a group of stars that looks kind of like a teapot. So there is the top of the teapot. Here's the handle. And then there's the bowl and the spout right here. So this is a constellation called Sagittarius. And it's not actually supposed to be a teapot. It's supposed to be a centaur archer. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'll add some artwork to help you. I guess this part kind of makes a little bit of sense, but this constellation points toward the center of our galaxy. So if you've ever noticed the big cloudy band stretching across the sky, which you can really only see if you go away from the city, you want to go someplace where there's very little light pollution, you can see the cloudy band of our own galaxy. And so Sagittarius, this constellation, in addition to it being near some planets and the moon right now, it always points toward the center of our galaxy. So if we live in a big spiral disk, the central area kind of has a bulge because it's very bright. There's lots of stars in there. So Sagittarius actually points toward where the center of the galaxy is. So if you are able to get outside of the city and look at the plane of the galaxy, this part you'll notice is actually much brighter than the rest of it. So if we back up, you can actually see there's a lot of glow here compared to other parts of the plane of the galaxy. I just wanted to point that out so you have a better idea of what part of the sky we are looking in. All right, so we talked about the moon. Right above it is a very bright object, and these two objects actually here are planets. They're the two largest planets in the solar system. So if you have an idea of what planets they might be, go ahead and put it in the chat.
While people are telling us what those planets are, Katie, do you know what times those are visible tonight?
The planets?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're pretty much visible from when it gets dark until like the wee early morning hours. My guess is around like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They will set. So, but then you can see another planet that rises over in the eastern part of the sky. But you can pretty much see them all night if you go to bed at like a reasonable time.
Sounds good. We have lots of folks saying that those are Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah, that's correct. The two largest planets in our solar system. So Jupiter is the largest, and that's going to be this one right here. And we can zoom in. So this is the view that you would get if you had a telescope or maybe even like a really strong pair of binoculars, you might be able to see a fuzzy Jupiter. But with this program, we can zoom in, which is really awesome. Jupiter is the largest planet. If you could open it up like a cookie jar and try to fill it with Earths, you could fit over 1,300 Earths inside of it. So it's really, really big volume-wise, but it's not made of the same stuff. Does anyone know what Jupiter is made of?
While people are thinking, oh, no, actually, we've got some answers. So a lot of people are saying are gases or gas.
Yeah, that's correct. Jupiter is a gas giant. So is Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. They're all gas giants. Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars are all rocky, small rocky planets. So made of different stuff and very different sizes. But the fact that Jupiter is made of gas actually contributes a lot to what it looks like and what types of things are on the kind of uppermost layers of its atmosphere. So basically like its surface. You'll notice that there are bands across Jupiter's surface here. So different colors, different shades of orange and white, and even like almost a bluish color. So those bands happen because Jupiter spins really quickly. A day on the Earth is 24 hours, but a day on Jupiter is only 9 or 10 hours. So it's much bigger than the Earth. It's much more massive as well. So mass is a measurement of how much stuff something is made up of, whereas size is like how much space the thing takes up. So Jupiter has both. It has a lot of size. It's very big and takes up a lot of space. And it's also very massive, meaning that it's made up of a lot of material, a lot of gas. So if you have something that large and massive spinning so quickly, then you get a lot of chaos in the atmosphere. So the different gases in the atmosphere can easily spread apart into these bands. And so the different bands are actually kind of separated because different gases have different densities. You'll also notice that there are a lot of circular features on its surface. So all of those are storms. Again, because you have all these gases spinning really quickly, it's very easy for storms to form. And of course, the most famous of these storms is the Great Red Spot, which looks like it's probably on the nighttime side of Jupiter. So we can't see it here. But if you want to take a look, definitely look it up after the program today. It's super cool looking. And you could fit 2 to 3 Earths right across the Great Red Spot. It's like a massive hurricane. It's got an eye at the center, and it's been raging for a very long time. We have known about the Great Red Spot for at least 400 years, but that's just when it was discovered. So it could have been, hundreds of years prior to that it started. It is getting smaller over time. So eventually it will disappear, but at that point, Jupiter might have another huge storm on its surface. It's got storms all the time. But I highly recommend looking up what it looks like after the program. You'll notice some other points of light around Jupiter here. Does anybody know what those might be?
All right, while we're waiting for people to look up that one, a person is wondering, is Sagittarius always next to the moon?
No. So Sagittarius, so the stars and the Milky Way, they spin, or they only look like they move because the Earth is spinning. So the stars don't actually move at all, neither does the Milky Way. But the moon is orbiting around the Earth, right? So the moon will change position over the course of a day and over the course of a month, simply because of Earth's rotation and because it's orbiting around the Earth. So it will not always be near Sagittarius. So maybe today and tomorrow or yesterday, it'll be kind of in the same general-ish area. But if you were to wait, more than a few days or a week from now, it will be in a different part of the sky just because it's orbiting around the Earth. So it's not staying fixed with the stars at all.
Thank you. And so our answer to what those dots are around Jupiter is lots of people are saying moons.
Yep, Those are Jupiter's 4 largest moons. Jupiter has 79 moons in total, so it's got a ton of them, but these 4 are they're the bigger ones around Jupiter, and they're called the Galilean moons because he saw them through his telescope. And you can, if they're in the right position in their orbits around Jupiter, you can also see them through a telescope. And they're really cool places all on their own. I could dedicate a whole show just to the moons of Jupiter, but to give you a quick overview of them. So Ganymede is the largest moon in the whole solar system. It is bigger than the planet Mercury. So that's one of Jupiter's Galilean moons. Another one, Callisto, has lots of craters and scratches on its surface from just being really, really old and fairly unchanged. So it's been battered by a lot of material in space. Europa is an icy moon. So its surface is covered in ice, but underneath the surface, there's a liquid water ocean with more water than the Earth, which is really cool. Astronomers were really surprised by that because Jupiter is so far away from the sun. It's very cold out there. Didn't think there would be any chance for liquid water. But underneath the surface of Europa, it turns out that it's warmer than we thought. And so there's a whole liquid water ocean. And then finally, we have Io, the last of the Galilean moons, which is the most volcanically active place in the entire solar system. Basically, anywhere on its surface is covered by a volcano. So the Galilean moons around Jupiter are really awesome. All right, so let's move right on over to Saturn, and we can zoom in on Saturn. Have there been any questions about Jupiter or its moons so far?
There's a question from Prisha, age 8, who would like to know, is there life on Jupiter?
Oh, good question. So far, we don't know of any life anywhere else in the universe except for on Earth or orbiting around Earth, like the astronauts that are in the International Space Station. So we've never found it anywhere else. But these moons, like Europa, the icy moon that has a subsurface ocean, we think that there are some conditions on moons like Europa that could potentially be suitable for life as we know it. So we've never discovered any life around one of these moons, but the conditions are right that it could be possible. So it's a reason why we want to send more spacecraft out to that part of the solar system. Jupiter itself wouldn't be able to have any life as we know it because we need a rocky planet to survive. Anything that's on the Earth that's living needs a solid, like, I guess a lot of it lives in the ocean, but like there's a lot of rock and material and it needs water. And Jupiter doesn't really have those things because it's a gas giant. There's no solid surface. It's very cold and it's just made of gas. So it wouldn't be suitable for life as we know it. But maybe some of the moons around Jupiter and Saturn could be. Because Saturn does have a moon similar to Europa called Enceladus with another subsurface ocean with hydrothermal vents on the seafloor. And that's pretty exciting because hydrothermal vents on Earth are breeding grounds for all kinds of really extreme forms of life that use chemicals instead of sunlight for energy. So it's possible that, these around these hydrothermal vents, it would be a really good place for these like microbial forms of extreme life. So Saturn's got one of those awesome moons too. And it's part of the reason why I love Saturn so much, but also its beautiful ring system is, undeniably amazing. Its rings are really luminous because they're made of ice, so they reflect a lot of sunlight. There are other planets that have rings, so all of the gas giants have rings, but they're made of rock and dust, which is not as great at reflecting sunlight. So Saturns are much more brilliant because of that. They're huge too. If you went from one side to the other, that's about the distance from the Earth to the moon. It's about 175,000 miles across. And the planet itself is also made of gas, similar to Jupiter, mostly hydrogen and helium gases. And if you could open up Saturn like a cookie jar, you could fill it with about 760 Earths. So Not quite as big as Jupiter, but still one of the monsters in the solar system. And it also has a lot of moons. It actually has more moons than Jupiter now. Saturn is the king of moons at 82, which was just happened like a year ago, actually. Astronomers found 20 new moons around Saturn. So it brought it out in first. Before that, Saturn was always second for number of moons in the solar system. But now it has the title of the reigning moon king. So Saturn is probably my favorite planet in the solar system, but they're all really cool. And there is one more that I want to show you, but first I will stop for questions.
So first of all, that's a lot of moons. And
Yes.
second of all, Andrew, age 8, was wondering what that black line in the rings of Saturn was.
Oh, so the black lines, they're actually gaps in the rings. So if we zoom in really quick, so right here, there's a really big gap. So you can notice that there are some others as well, but this is the biggest gap. It's called the Cassini division, and it's just an area where there's no ice in there. So it's kind of been cleared out because the gravity of a moon that's out here called Mimas, you can't see it because it's small. It only kind of showed some of the more prominent moons, but there's a moon out here that its gravity pulls out on the ice particles in the ring system, and so does Saturn. So it actually created this gap in the rings. So it's just an area where there's no material within the ring system.
Aha. And Alyssa wants to know, why are the rings circular?
Yeah, another good question. So we think that the rings of Saturn formed about 100 million years ago, which is actually pretty recent if we're talking about the lifetime of the solar system. But we think it formed from a moon that was made of ice that got too close to Saturn. And so Saturn's gravity tore it apart, and all of the ice was orbiting around Saturn. And just because of something called angular momentum and how things orbit and move in space, it flattened out over time, kind of like if you imagine a ball of pizza dough and spinning it up in the air, kind of how it flattens out. That's kind of what happened to Saturn's ring. Everything just settled into the plane that formed the ring system around Saturn. So it's just naturally in that kind of flat shape, and because it's orbiting something that's spherical, then it kind of forms a circle, a circular orbit. All right, so one more thing I want to show you today is Mars, which is really low in the east. Mars is visible much longer throughout the night because right now it's 10 p.m. And so it's just rising, so you'll be able to see it throughout the night if you like to stay up. And Mars you can easily spot because you can see its red color. It's super obvious because it's so much redder than all of the objects and stars around it. Now, the reason it's red is because of all the iron in its soil. So it's pretty much the rusty planet. And it's got some really cool surface features. It's got a canyon that's 5 times as big as the Grand Canyon. It's got a mountain that's the biggest mountain in the whole solar system. It's like 2 to 3 times the size of Everest. So even though it's a smaller planet than the Earth, it's only about half the size of the Earth. It's got some of the most extreme features on its surface of any place in the whole solar system. It also has 2 moons, but they're much smaller than the moons we've talked about today. They're called Phobos and Deimos, and they're shaped more like lumpy potatoes because we think they were captured. They were asteroids, and they were floating by Mars, and Mars's gravity kind of got them stuck in orbit. So we call them captured moons, and they are shaped like potatoes, which is one of my favorite facts about Mars. So I will stop there, and I can actually just throw up all of the constellations. I keep pushing the wrong button. There we go. Take that down, and that way you get one last look at the night sky. And the next time we do a night sky show, maybe not next week, but the one after, I will cover one of the other topics that we had in the poll today.
Thank you so much, Katie, for taking us on this journey through space. It's been so much fun.
Of course.
And thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you also had fun on this journey through space. And if you did enjoy it, come back next Friday or the Friday after, and you can see some virtual planetarium stuff. Katie, I'll let you say goodbye. All right, and I will pull up our thank you slide so that you guys can all see some stuff while I'm talking to you. So thank you again for all joining us, for all your questions, for all your comments. There's so many good ones. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them today. If you did enjoy this program and you want to see what other virtual programs the museum is offering, you can follow the museum on our social media channels, or you can check out www.mos.org/mos@home. And if you enjoyed today's presentation and would like to support more programming like this, you can visit engage.mos.org/welcome to support MOS at home. And as Katie mentioned earlier, today's program was produced using the free software Stellarium, which you can find at www.stellarium.org. Thank you all for participating, and we hope you'll join us again soon.